Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to It's on My List, personal productivity tools, tips, and tricks. Let me tell you a little bit about how this came to be. It's kind of a half joke on the California Library Association Facebook page. Somebody was like, hey, there's a big thread about productivity, and somebody was like, hey, somebody should do a thing about this. And everybody's like, yeah, somebody should. And I was like, okay, fine, let's do this thing. So here we are. The name of this particular art presentation comes from a very specific thing that I say probably every day, and I see a couple of people out there who work with me. So if you say, "Hey, what's this? What's going on with that one thing?" It's on my list, and so that's kind of where this all originated. We are. All have a wide variety of things to talk about. We're going to move fast. I know it's late in the afternoon. You guys walked a long way to get over here. There's exciting stuff happening. We understand that. I will give you an incentive to stick around. We have buttons, as you see on the screen, actual live buttons. Dang. I only have 50 of them, so if you don't get one, we'll figure out a way to get you one. So I'll figure it out by the end. Okay, so we don't have all the answers. You'll hear a variety of things. Well, collectively, maybe we do. Individually, but we can share what works for us and what doesn't work for us. We can give you some ideas to try out and to help increase your productivity and the ability to get shit done. So here's who we are. We're not in this order. I'm Susan. Letty down there at the end is from Palos Verdes. Genesis, Courtney, and Derek, who will get us started.
Thank you, Susan. So we have a variety of things to share with you. My colleagues to my right and Susan all have actual systems that they use for managing a lot of their time. So they're going to talk about those and give you a lot of practical information. I'm going to give you a little bit more kind of high-level philosophy of how you can prioritize some things and maybe a history of a couple different systems that you might want to consider and as you think about making lists and how you organize your priorities in order to get everything done that you need to get done. This has been one of my favorite comic strips for actually since it was published in 2001. For anyone who can't see the screen, we have the HR expert Dogbert here explaining to the pointy-haired boss that he can teach you to manage your time more efficiently by putting all of your high priorities on one list, your low priorities on the other, and then do everything on both lists, even if it kills you, or else you're a freaking loser. Does that resonate with anybody? Does anybody feel like that at work? Maybe a little bit. We do make a lot of lists, and often there are things that are difficult to get to the small stuff, to get to the detail stuff, or sometimes it's hard to get to the big stuff. So I'm going to talk a little bit about paths to consider all of those things. In terms of managing time to work on things, there's a few just sort of conceptual bases for how you can organize things. One is based on time. There's a technique that a lot of people use called Pomodoro, which is based on kind of bursts of working in 45 minutes and then taking 15 minutes off, and then work on a different thing for 45 minutes and taking 15 minutes off. Someone else got super scientific about it and decided that 52 minutes and 17 minutes were better intervals than 45 and 15, so you can also use the 52-17 technique. One sort of fun thing that I've read about that Jerry Seinfeld talks about when he's putting together a big show, when he's going to go on tour, he has kind of a philosophy that is don't break the chain. Keep the momentum going, and as he's working on a big show, he has a big wall calendar, and when he's worked on the show for that day, he puts a big red X on that day, and he just makes sure that until it's time to go on tour, that he works on it every single day, and you have to have the red X on every single day on the calendar. So for people who have trouble working on the big projects that have a deadline that needs to get done, that's one thing to think about, just making sure that you devote time to it every single day. A fascinating thing that I've read about that is used, I think, more by creatives than managers and people in civil service work. I don't think it would work at all for me. There's a thinker named Dave Lee that came up with this concept of having certain days that you do certain things. And so Monday is budget day, and Tuesday is human resources day, and Wednesday is marketing day. And when you have a marketing thing that comes in on Thursday, you just save it for next Wednesday because that's your marketing day. I don't think that works in its complete form, but there may be some value in thinking about chunking things by those subject areas, maybe in increments of a little bit less than a day, but something to look at. Another way of organizing lists and priorities is by the size of the tasks you have to work on. The 1-3-5 methodology is based on, for every day, having one big thing that you work on, 3 medium-sized things that you work on, and 5 small things. Just kind of a way of making sure that you address all of the things that are from the super time-consuming to the relatively quick. Just go into every day with a big thing, 3 middle-sized things, and 5 small things. Another thing, Eat That Frog, is another system based on a quote that's attributed to Mark Twain, which is that if you start off your day by eating a live frog, everything that you do for the rest of the day will be downhill from there. Everything will be better and easier. And so it's sort of a philosophy of tackling the biggest, gnarliest, worst thing you have to work on first thing in the morning, and work on that for as long as you can before you have to shift into other priorities. Also around the turn of the century, Ivy Lee was a great management consultant who worked with a number of the kind of titans of industry around the turn of the century. And the system was incredibly simple. It's just at the end of each workday, make a list of 6 things you're going to do on the next workday. Put them in priority order from 1 to 6. And don't start working on number 2 until you finish number 1. And just plug through the list. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you only get to 3, then number 4 becomes number 1 on the list for the next day, and you just sort of keep things moving that way. Something that's probably a little bit more realistic in terms of how we organize priorities is thinking about things in terms of how important they are and how urgent they are. And there's a lot of literature that takes these basic concepts and aligns them different ways. One of these that was developed by President Eisenhower, a matrix. On one axis you have how urgent things are, and on the other axis you have how important things are. And it's pretty straightforward that the things that have an immediate sense of urgency and are really important, do it. If there is something that is not urgent but is important, you need to decide, you need to create time to make sure that happens, but it doesn't necessarily have to be right now. You just have to carve out a plan. If it's not important, but it really needs to be done right now, then delegate that to somebody else if it's in your power to do so. And then if it's not important and it's not urgent, what are you doing? Don't clutter up your list with those items. Stephen Covey took the same concept and kind of treated it a little bit differently in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You've got this in the slides, you can look at it, but it's basically the same concept of making sure that you're taking care of all the really important things, whether they're urgent or not, and finding ways to minimize the amount of time you spend on the less important things. There's some funny language that's in this. In the not important but urgent are many popular activities. I'm not exactly sure what that all includes, but this matrix is definitely, I think, a helpful way of prioritizing how you arrange your lists. So what do I really do in terms of organizing myself? I have kind of a 3-part to-do list that's in my mind. I don't have a single list. I use what's in my email inbox, which I try to keep as minimal as possible. Sometimes I have tasks scheduled in my calendar. If I am tired of seeing it in my inbox and I don't want to have to keep looking at it every day, then I schedule some time to work on that thing and put it in my calendar so that I can address it that way. And then I have a whiteboard that I keep kind of long-term things as well as all of the standing meetings I have. So if I have a list of things I need to talk with our attorneys about, things I need to talk with my managers about, things I need to talk with my boss about, things I need to talk with my board about, so that when it comes time for those meetings and I'm running out the door and I haven't really thought about it that day, but I have a meeting with the city manager in 5 minutes, I go, oh, what's on my city manager list? And then I can, take a picture of it with my phone and take it with me to my meeting so that I have it. I mentioned calendaring activities. I think that is a really valuable way to make sure that you get things done, to actually carve out a time and say, I'm going to work on this project at a specific time. I'm a big fan of answering email in chunks. One of the things that's hardest to really focus and to be productive is having email notifications that pop up every 2 minutes when you get another message. Turn off the notifications. Don't look at them. You know you're getting email. You know that when you look, there's going to be email there. It's not like they're going to go away. So I think it's best to, and if you're really disciplined, you can even calendar time. You can say that from 10 to 11 and from 3 to 4 every day is when I look at email, and then I'm not going to look at it the rest of the time. That's harder to do in reality than it seems in philosophy, but I think that ideally it's a good way of looking at things. I think also giving yourself a break from the email is really important. I actually do my best to not look at email on evenings or weekends if I can at all avoid it, unless I'm expecting something really urgent to come in. And then the last thing I just want to mention really briefly, I was so excited to find out this was a thing that has a website and everything. Structured procrastination. Is anyone here a procrastinator? Excellent. So the concept of structured procrastination is, when you procrastinate, you're doing something instead of doing something else. And so for me, I like to take all those little things, some things that might be important but not urgent, and just sort of like put off the big hairy project, put off the most important thing as long as I possibly can, by doing every last stupid little thing that, if I just need to send somebody contact information, or I need to reply that I'm coming to a meeting, like I can get all that stuff done, and then once I'm up against the wall with the deadline for whatever the big hairy project is, when there's, it's due the next morning, and there's no choice but to buckle down and get it done, then I buckle down and get it done. So that's the story of structured procrastination. And now I'm going to turn things over to Courtney.
Derek, I've never done that.
Certainly not this week.
No, it was definitely not happening this week. All right, so I'm going to give you just practical tips that I've discovered over the path of taking on more people as I've moved up the chain, because, Lord, I was not prepared when I first did it. So find a system that works for you, and that's what it is. If you don't have a system, get one. So I became a huge fan of Outlook because I was that person who always only had a paper calendar, and it got to the point where that thing was dragging with me, and I would forget it and just be completely useless in meetings because I didn't have my paper calendar in front of me. So I had to move to Outlook. And so a couple of tips that I used was to create folders in your Outlook that make the most sense to you. So my entire left hand of Outlook has AA staff person name, AA staff person name, AA staff person name, and all of the AA's are my people who report directly to me, so that folder can get pulled right over. When I get an email from that person and I answer it, it goes to live in its folder. The people that I talk to the most have their names at the top of my left-hand list of folders, so that I don't have to look, I don't have to drag down, it's just right on over. I have also trained all of the staff that report to me to build agendas in our Outlook meetings. So if you click into your meeting, it's only viewable by people who are invited to the meeting. And that way you can build your agenda in there so that they know what's coming when you have your next meeting with them, but they can also add their own agenda items. I even got a little, not sophisticated, but added another layer and actually created an organizational system within each agenda or within each meeting so that it's like, okay, admin, youth services, adult services. So everything is always organized when I need to pull it out for that meeting. So I just go in, copy, paste, good to go. One word for the wise, if you cancel that meeting, your agenda's lost. So not anybody naming people, stop canceling our meeting. So if you move it, it's fine. But if you cancel it, your agenda's gone. So you've been forewarned. I also am a big fan of clearing my email. I try and get out every day with 5 or less emails. I'm pretty good at it. Everything gets a red flag if I have not dealt with it, period. And then when I'm done with it, the red flag goes away and it goes home to whichever file folder it belongs in. It works really well because if I know okay, this email came from that person, I can go to that person's file, go in there, and it's there. It also just clears my brain. I'm that person who has to have an organized workspace and it has to be clean for me to start. Same thing at home. I have to have a clean house if I want to relax. So that's how I operate at work as well. Lots of red flags, lots of boxes. All right, who knows this movie? So people ask me, what's going on? I'm right on top of that, Rose. I don't report to anybody named Rose, but I'm right on top of that. So straight up old school lists. I'm a big fan of pen and paper. And what I've started to do now as I've again moved up is structure those lists a little bit more definitively. So if I have a sheet of paper, I'm going to divide it into quadrants. This is going to be adult services, this is youth services, this is admin, whatever my departments might be. And all of my notes, if that's what I'm working with, are going to be divided into quadrants. What I've realized is at this point, I don't even have time to get my notes into the stuff who can take notes anymore? There's no time. Somebody give me a laptop. So my paper notes have become quadrant oriented so that when I do have the time to actually get back and type them up or send them out or share them out, they're at least organized on the piece of paper. So I'm not looking in 400 places to get my stuff organized. File folders. Woohoo! So I am totally with Mike Wazowski here. Just float away. So one of the new tricks that I've learned as well is everybody gets 2 physical file folders. One of them is past meetings where I've taken my notes because I still don't have a work laptop. So when I go to a meeting and I'm taking notes on it and then I go back and I finally type it up and I'm done and I'm finished, I file that away so I can refer back to it in case something comes up. The other file folder is for stuff that I need to actually physically discuss with that person. So worst case scenario, my meeting Outlook agenda doesn't work. I just print everything out and put it in that folder. And then when I'm getting ready for a meeting, all I have to do is grab that folder and everything that I want to discuss is also in there. It's also a great way when you've got a grant application or a receipt that didn't get paid or just another random piece of paper that needs to be discussed. It's in that folder. Everybody has a folder. So my desk, again, that I need to be clean is cleared. Everything is in its own folder. Lisa Frank, y'all. It's good stuff. Old school notebooks now is what I've moved to as well. I don't have mine, so I'm just going to show off Genesis's. So, genocide?
That's the plural.
I like it. We're just going to clone Genesis. Okay, so you got your notebook, right? You're writing your notes. What I've taken to doing is once I've done everything that's on that one piece of paper, I fold that sucker in half, and then it no longer exists. I'm terrified to pull it out and trash it because that'll be the day that I need it. So I just fold it in half. And then my next list starts on the next page. And then when it's done, fold it in half. It's if you're a visual person and you need that sense of accomplishment, the more pages folded in half, you're like, man, I'm really blowing through work today. I got this handled. So it's that visual representation that you are actually accomplishing something. Next up. And then if you know me, you fake it till you make it. So if you're not the most organized person, that's okay. It's not about listening to Derek and being like, oh, that's my system, or listening to me and being like, okay, that's me. It's about finding a system that works for you, no matter what it is. If it is a paper calendar, kudos. If it's Outlook, great. If it's a Lisa Frank folder, I'm going to want to know where you bought it and encourage you to use that some more. Don't spend so much time on making the list that you don't accomplish anything on the list. I think it's very easy to start worrying so much about what you have to do that you actually don't do what you need to do. So be aware of falling into that one. And really try to empty that email. So many of the people that are like, Courtney, can you help me with this? It's because they get so swamped with their daily email. If you just go in there and approach it and kill it, then it's off your plate and you can stop worrying about the email that's sitting and waiting for you when you get back.
All right. So I'm going to talk about digital tools a little bit. But before I do that, let me just declare my love of paper and pens and notebooks and organizational systems in general. I have pretty much tried everything. I literally signed up for another organizational system like 2 hours ago. So you know, got a lot of accounts out there. Does anybody remember Hipster PDA? Yes. It was basically a stack of 3x5 cards and a binder clip. Yeah. Loved it. And it totally worked for me at that time in my life. And so just to kind of build on, what you're going to hear a lot, find something that works for you in the moment you are right now. I will tell you, every time I have moved to a different job, my system explodes. Like I have a great system and it's beautiful and it works. And I was a children's librarian. I had this wonderful system and then I became a library manager and yeah, it was all useless to me at that point. Same thing as I've moved through. So, it's finding something that works for you and works for you in the moment and abandoning things is totally okay. There's no one size fits all. But the basics for me, the basics are always the same. I do not try to keep information in my head. I get it all out somewhere in a trusted system. Sometimes it takes a little while to build that trusted system into a system that you actually do trust. But for me, that's what works. So I have a lot of different things, and I'll tell you right now, I'm still working on. I've changed jobs about a year ago, and I'm still working on what works for me best now. But what's working for me really well right now is Evernote. So how many have Evernote on their phone right now? And maybe you use it, maybe you don't. And that was me for years. I had it on my phone and on every device I own, but I kind of didn't use it. But here's how I use it now. I keep meeting notes on it when I do have a laptop in front of me. I use research. I save research projects for it for presentations and writing I have to do. I do that through a Chrome extension that allows me to send stuff directly from Chrome. I use it for all my travel documents, all my reference materials. For example, so I have the strategic plan with me at all times, our final budget with me at all times in Evernote. I use it for writing. I use it for all my first drafts of any kind of lengthy email, memos, papers, articles, whatever. All starts in Evernote. I use it for things to read. Just to get super nerdy, I use if this then that to save things to Evernote for things I want to read. We can talk about that later over drinks. I will save emails related to a particular project. I don't use folders. Sorry. Right? I don't actually use folders that much because I find it, for me, too fussy. Everything goes into dated folders. So if it happened in November of 2018, that's the folder it goes into. I heavily rely on tags and searching. And Evernote is fantastic at search, and OCR, if you just scan in written notes, it will actually search them, which is lovely. But I really use it a lot for meeting planning. So I'm responsible on a weekly basis for 3 different meetings, other meetings that are quarterly, other meetings that are every other month. I have to come up with the agenda for a lot of meetings. And so I keep track of all of that in Evernote and a running list that so I can see what we did in the past. And then I also, and this is the nerdiest thing, I basically have created my own template as a weekly planner. And this is a fake one that has some information about how I use it. Don't try to read it on the screen. It's super tiny, but it's in your slides. And so I keep my schedule on here, which is on I transfer from my Google Calendar, because my Google Calendar is my life. I'll get to that in a sec. But so I transfer my schedule for the week on here, so I kind of have a week-long view of what's going to be happening. I keep notes from meetings or those unplanned meetings, that like, hey, do you have a minute? And it turns out to be something you actually like need to remember again later. I keep all of my tasks on this list. You can see the far column it's a task list. I carry that over to the next week if those things aren't done. If I find myself carrying them over and over again, I determine if I really need to actually do them. Maybe I don't, because it's been 3 weeks and I still haven't done it. So, and then, I just keep track of all notes. You'll notice a couple things on here are green because Evernote has the ability to link to other notes within Evernote, as well as to web pages and even to files that you have saved on your computer. And so I don't have to go searching for my Board of Library Commissioners meeting agenda page. I just click through and it's right there. So like I said, this seems probably to you very fussy and like a lot of things, but it's what works for me. And I think that's one of the things to remember. Like, and again, you'll hear this, there's no magical thing that will just transform your life into organized bliss. Because, I would have found that by now. Yeah. It's what works for you, but it is going to take some time. You do have to submit yourself, get used to the idea that a system will take time if you want to have it work for you and be trusted. Okay, so that was a super fast look at Evernote. Again, don't try to read everything on here. I'll explain what this is. This is a dashboard that I set up in a wiki. It's the start page on every single browser I ever use in my life. Laptops, desk at work, desk at home, everything. And I use this, I realized when I was putting this together, I like having all the information all the time instantly. So that's what this is. I keep bookmarks I use all the time, some passwords I never remember, but I need to have at hand. My employee ID number, which I can never remember. Tips, like I can never remember how to make an accented E in Word, so I have that on here. I also keep things that, and again, just to get super nerdy here, Pinboard is a bookmarking service similar to Delicious, if you guys remember that. So I can save bookmarks. They end up here if I tag them with library. And then, other things that I want to remember. And then this graphic here, that's my theme for the year. This is totally happening. I talk about Asana all day. How many of you are familiar with Asana? I know you guys are back there because they use it. Asana is a pretty heavy-duty project management system. And just because something has a huge number of features, you don't have to use them all. Like, you can just use the ones that work for you. It's really great if you're working on team projects. It has wonderful timelining. Again, it takes a little bit of time to think about how you're going to get the most out of it and set it up, but it will remind you when things are due. It'll remind everybody on your team when the things are due, when you have things that you should have done that aren't done yet. It also will integrate with your Google Calendar, so it puts those to-do items right on your calendar as long as you have a date on them. That's probably my favorite part of it is the Google Calendar thing. There's lots of different project manager type things out there and task manager. I find this works for me, works for my team, but again, find what works for you. I think everybody's going to talk about the calendar. The calendar that's the one place that if it's on there, it will happen. If it's on there, and so sometimes somebody will say, this happened the other day, somebody said, hey, did you read that thing? And I was like, I'm going to put it on my calendar right now, because it needs to be read by the end of the day. So if it's on my calendar, it's going to happen. If it's not on my calendar, it probably will not happen. No, that's not true. Maybe. So finally, I just wanted to touch on this thing of Like I said, I love notebooks. I love pens, but in my workplace, I have one pen. There we go. I have one notebook, and I have one pen. I hide all the other paper off of my desk. I don't have Post-it notes. I don't have little notebooks. I don't have adorable handouts from vendors. It all is hidden out of view because otherwise I'll start writing down notes on various pieces of paper, and then I'm like, oh, I know I wrote this down. And I literally still do this. And anybody, again, who works with me knows that I'm like, I wrote that down, I don't know where. So I try to make sure I'm not writing on the agenda when in a meeting. It goes in my notebook, not on the agenda. I keep one notebook and one pen. And, I actually keep a fairly nice pen because it's easier to keep track of. Everyone knows that that's my pen. They don't try to steal it because everybody else would know they stole it. And it you tend to try and keep track of it a little bit better than an inexpensive pen. My last tip is I've really fallen in love with the idea of one-pagers. So you know how they're always talking about have that elevator pitch. Well, in my position, I have like 52 different things that are elevator pitches that I need to remember. And so I've started creating one-pagers with stats, names, history, a little bit of background, what's going on with that particular project. So if I'm in a situation unexpectedly, it goes in Evernote, and I can say, yeah, we've had, 193 graduates from Career Online High School, and here's how long we've been doing it, and here's what we've been doing, and here's when our next graduation is. Stuff that would be some Career Online High School, clearly, I do remember, but there's a lot of stuff that I might not be able to have at my fingertips. And so that's another tip I have for you if you have like a bazillion things to remember. Okay. And actually, one last thing. So my favorite phrase of all time is a Korean proverb that says, starting is half. So getting started is your best thing you can do.
All righty. I'm here to make you all feel better about yourselves. So let's be real. There is no magical system that will turn you into an organized person. This picture right here is what my desk looks like way more often than I would like to admit. And the reason I know that there's no magical system is because I've tried pretty much everything. In fact, starting new organizational systems is one of my favorite forms of procrastination, So... so I've tried getting things done. I've tried bullet journaling. I've tried Evernote and OneNote and Trello and various all kinds of to-do list apps, all kinds of stuff. And what I find is that systems that require a lot of maintenance do not work for me. So the more complicated the system is, the shorter its duration in my organizational system. Getting things done. Too much of my work fell under one context because I sit at a computer all day. And I spent a lot of time trying to maintain a system that just didn't really help me very much. Bullet journaling. I couldn't keep track of all the different little symbols. And then the index just killed me. I cannot maintain an index. And that's kind of the foundation of the system and finding all your stuff. And sorry. Apps, as much as I'm on my phone, which is a lot, I just prefer paper for list making and notes. And I've never been really satisfied with the integration of the various apps with Microsoft Office, which our organization is very dependent on, and Outlook and everything. And so those just never really became a key component of the system. I'm a piler, not a filer. So every time I've tried a system that requires moving things off my desk and into files, I end up missing deadlines and losing track of details. I'm at my worst organizationally if my desk is completely clean. But it's important to know what your optimum level of mess is. So I work well when I have two piles and they're relatively neat. And I've got my one pile that's kind of my very current urgent task. This is what I'm working on right now. And my second pile is stuff that's coming up or stuff that I might need to refer to as I'm working on this pile. And that system works pretty well for me. When those piles get too tall and start to collapse into each other, or a third pile develops, like that's pretty bad. Still not as bad as when the desk is clean, but it's pretty bad. Don't let people dump stuff in your workspace. Protect your workspace zealously. And this is because if you are not the most organized person, like those random things that you don't know what to do with will just sit there and clutter up your space. Your clutter is fine, other people's clutter is not okay. So can you go back to the previous slide? Okay. So do you see that cardboard box sitting against my wall? That was there for months. We got a delivery that came too late. We wanted to keep the item. We didn't have a place figured out to store it. It sat in my office for months. There's a little spray bottle on my desk right there. Someone who was retiring brought that in. It's called Focus Spray. She's like, I thought you might like this. I don't like the smell. It took me months. You can go back to the new slide, and you can see this one I took just well. It's still there. Still there. I did finally, in honor of this presentation, get rid of it. But those are the kinds of things that it's like, if you let those things into your space, they will stay in your space and they will clutter up your space because it's just too much mental energy to try to move them out. So don't let those things into your space. My current system, I use the Panda Planner right here. It's called the Panda Planner because it has a cute little embossed panda on the front. It's so sweet. And I like it because it kind of helps with structuring. It's got a monthly, weekly, and daily component to it. It helps me move from big picture to small picture, which is good, but it's not too much all at once. So a planner covers 3 months, and it helps you focus on priorities, and it also integrates your personal life and your work life, which is, for me, important. I've never been successful at kind of keeping everything separated into neat little boxes. Stuff spills over. So if I can kind of have everything all in one place, like I put my personal appointments on my Outlook calendar at work because I can't manage 2 calendars. Those are kind of some of the key things for me. There's a space in the Panda Planner, I don't know how you can see it, for like 5 priorities. This is a daily layout right there. I cannot handle 5 priorities in a day. I don't write 5 priorities down. I try and keep it to 2. Sometimes 3 if it's like 2 work and a personal or something like that. So get to know yourself, how you work. If 5 priorities, it's like, it's just too much division. I can't focus on 5 things at once, so I have to start with 2. The other thing that's really good about this is it's really good at surfacing things that you're calling priorities that you keep not getting done because they're migrating day after day after day. So I found it a really useful tool to help me go, okay, why am I not getting that done? What's the roadblock? What's getting in my way? Sometimes I get a little flaky with maintaining my system, and I found with the Panda Planner, if I don't start it off right at the beginning of the week, I'm much more likely to not keep it going, and then it's not useful to me. So I really try, Monday morning I come in and get that going. I use a basic notebook. This has a very small section for note-taking in the back. It's not enough for kind of all the meetings and stuff, so I just use a basic notebook to take notes because I like to take notes by hand. And then I just put stars by my action items so that I can easily go through and skim and find what my action items are, pull those out, put them on the planner. I've tried lots of different note-taking systems and different things like that. I keep coming back to that same thing. That's kind of what works for me. And I rely heavily on my Outlook calendar. Like I said, our organization is very Microsoft dependent. Everything's done through Outlook. I do not use the tasks option in Outlook. I put everything on my calendar because if it's not on my calendar, it's not going to get done. So I calendar time for writing, I calendar meeting time, I calendar planning time, I calendar phone calls, I calendar pretty much everything because otherwise my time just gets away from me. So that's kind of my current system. And again, it's really about finding the tools and the methods that support the way you think. If you're trying to kind of go against your own grain too much with a system is just never going to work. So if you're kind of a messy, disorganized person like me, embrace the mess, like be who you are, and then just try and find things that support you working more effectively through that mess.
So I'm going to cover lists because I do use notebooks, I use calendars, I use binders, I use files, I use everything. So I'm just going to cover lists for today. One of the things that I do encourage people to do is, well, I use both digital and paper lists. I love pens and papers, but I also like having the digital stuff as well available because it'll help me organize bigger projects. What I use written down lists is for daily and weekly to-dos. What I do recommend for a daily to-do, what I do is I force myself to look at my to-do list for the day or for the week before I turn on my computer. That way I look at what I want to accomplish for the week or for the day and prioritize that, okay, this is whatever comes my way via email or in meetings that I'm going to the week, I at least know what I want to prioritize for the week before more stuff gets piled on top of me. What I use also is Trello. So next slide. I like to use Trello because it's it's like a project management program, but I like it because I'm able to create boards based on, I have 3 different boards that goes my ongoing projects, my long-term projects, and then one big project. So if I need to plan like my one big project, I have summer reading program or whatever, you're able to create cards within that for your incentives, your partners, your programs. Within each card, you're able to create another list to add more lists and checkpoints, and you add dates. And if you get your team on Trello as well, you're able to assign duties and tasks and delegate within that, and allows you to create due dates and such. You could create an account or just link it to your Gmail account if you have that as well, so you could get your team on board with that, and it adds it to your calendar, to your Google Calendar. Next slide. I rely heavily on Google Docs. Google Docs are your friends because they have a lot of great templates that you could use. I have pulled a lot of templates from there to keep track of my budget, to keep track of programming, to keep track of huge projects, and use project management to be able to share that with my team. In our library, we actually use Gmail for our email system, but if you have, Outlook or Microsoft 360, make use of those shared documents. It's so helpful because all of my agendas, I create them on these Google documents. I share the agendas with my team. They know what's coming. They are able to add whatever they want to the agenda. And after we have the meeting, we take notes on it. And then I demonstrated there. I was so excited when I figured out I could do this. You highlight an item and you type in the email address of your team member, and it sends it out and gives them a reminder of what was delegated to them. And so one of my big thing about being organized and getting stuff done is transparency. I like to share all my information with everybody, so to make sure everybody's on the same page, and we all came out with the same action plan from our meetings. So after all these meetings that you attend to, you're like, wait, what happened at this meeting? You're able to follow through and share that with Google Docs. Next slide. What I also recommend you do if you're going to be using lists is to do an information download at the end of the day. After you're trying to get out of your office or your desk and pack everything up, turn off your computer and just take at the most 3 minutes. I put 3 to 5, but 3 minutes, and just download your brain, whatever's swirling around in there, and just write it down. Don't prioritize it. Just put it on there on whatever to-do list you have for your week, for the day. And at that moment, take the time to check off what you've already accomplished for the day. It's like, oh yeah, I did do this after I reviewed it during the day, and you feel the sense of accomplishment. So I do recommend you do that. Next slide. So what I have, I do quasi bullet journaling because I was so excited when I heard about bullet journaling, and I was like, yes, I finally get to use my washi tape, my markers, and all of my stationery. I'm like, I am set. When I looked it up, it was just too hard. I couldn't keep track of all the coding. So I created my own. I just created my own bullet journaling. I buy these $1.99 little notebooks from Muji. and they're so easy to use, and just take it with you to every single meeting. So on the next slide, you'll see an example of my meetings. I like to keep notes of all the meetings that I go to, and like everybody else, I used to write notes and ideas on Post-it notes on whatever piece of paper, on whatever agenda's around, and then I would lose it. I'm like, I remember I wrote it down somewhere, but I don't know where. So now I keep it on my little journal, and I create my own coding for it. Like every action item gets a little box that you have to check off, and every item that I think should be delegated to somebody gets a little star next to it. If something gets moved to the next week, they get a highlighted arrow that goes to the following week. So this is, and then I pull my meeting notes from here to put in my Google Docs that then gets sent out to my staff so that everything gets in place. In the next slide, you'll see how I organize my week. I keep my to-do list all along the bottom, and I just add items as they go along. So the little meetings that I have throughout the week are just like those moments when people come into your office. Do you have a second? So you're able to just actually document and keep track of everything, and then follow up with it and form it into a to-do list at the end. I don't do an index. I do a table of contents. So at the end of when I fill up a notebook, I just go back and number the pages and indicate and save the meeting notes that I know I want to reference back to later on with the page number. And I have done that several times. I have at least 4 of these bullet journals that I fill up, and I'm able to go through and just reference back to and follow through. And then I remember when stuff gets done, so that at the end, when you fill up all your bullet journaling, you have this great sense of accomplishment. You just feel like high-fiving a million angels, and it feels really great. Thank you.
Yay. All right, so our time is officially up. Here's how you get a hold of us. It's time to party now. Get it? But we're happy to answer some questions. If you need to leave, please feel free. Does anybody have any questions?